The distress signal. The morning light of three suns painted the sky of Zorani Prime in shades of amber and gold. Ambassador Keelan stood in the crystalline observation tower, watching her people go about their daily routines in the floating cities below. The Zorani were a peaceful species, their civilization built on harmony and scientific advancement rather than military might. Their bodies, translucent and ethereal, moved through the air like living auroras, communicating through bioluminescent patterns that danced across their skin. For 300 years, the Zorani had maintained their neutrality in galactic affairs. They had no standing army, no warships, only a small defense force meant for asteroid deflection and emergency rescue operations. Their greatest achievement was the Universal Translation Matrix, a technology they had freely shared with all species, believing that communication would prevent conflicts. This philosophy had served them well until today. The first warning came as a disruption in the planet's magnetic field. Kellen's assistant, a young Zorani named Thymel, burst into the observation chamber, his body flashing urgent patterns of red and orange. The long-range sensors had detected an approaching fleet of ships, massive vessels bearing the insignia of the Vorthak Empire. The Vorthak were conquerors, a militaristic species that viewed other civilizations as resources to be harvested. They had already consumed 12 star systems, enslaving populations and stripping worlds of their resources. Kellen felt a cold dread settle over her consciousness. The Vorthak had sent no communication, no demands, no opportunity for negotiation. Their intentions were clear from the energy signatures building in their weapons arrays. She moved quickly to the communication center, where dozens of Zorani operators were frantically trying to establish contact with the approaching fleet. Every attempt was met with silence. The Vorthak had no interest in talking. The first orbital bombardment struck the southern continent. Entire cities vanished in flashes of antimatter fire, their beautiful spires reduced to radioactive glass. Millions of Zorani voices cried out in the collective consciousness before going silent forever. Kellen watched in horror as the systematic destruction began. The Vorthak were not just invading. They were harvesting. Their ships deployed massive collection arrays, capturing fleeing Zorani in energy nets. Those taken alive would face a fate worse than death in the Vorthak processing facilities. In the chaos of the attack, Keelan made a decision that would change the fate of the galaxy. 3 months earlier, the Zorani had signed a mutual defense pact with a young species from a distant spiral arm. The humans had seemed primitive by galactic standards, having only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. But there had been something different about them, something that made even the most aggressive species speak of them in hushed tones. They came from a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years, a death world where survival meant becoming the apex predator. Kellen activated the quantum communication array, sending an emergency distress signal across the vast emptiness of space. The message was simple but desperate, transmitted in every human language simultaneously. This is Ambassador Keelan of Zorani Prime. We are under attack by the Vorthak Empire. Civilian populations being harvested, genocide in progress. By the terms of our defense pact, we request immediate assistance. Please help us. The signal raced through subspace, crossing thousands of light years in seconds. It arrived at Earth during a session of the United Nations Security Council, interrupting a debate about colonial expansion policies. The massive screens in the assembly hall lit up with images from Zorani Prime, showing the ongoing slaughter in real time. The delegates fell silent as they watched cities burn and civilians being captured like animals. General Harrison, Earth's military commander, stood slowly from his seat. He was an old soldier, scarred from the resource wars that had nearly destroyed Earth decades ago. His voice was calm but carried an edge that made even hardened politicians step back. The Zorani are under our protection. They trusted us when no one else would trade with the aggressive primates from Sol system. Now they're being exterminated. The Japanese representative spoke next. The Vorthak Empire controls significant military assets. Our fleet is smaller, less advanced in conventional terms. This could mean war with a superior force. Harrison turned to face the assembly, his expression grim. The Vorthak think they understand warfare because they have bigger ships and better shields. They're about to learn what happens when you attack those under humanity's protection. Within hours, Earth's entire military apparatus shifted into high gear. The Third Fleet, stationed at Mars' orbital platform, began immediate preparations for departure. Admiral Chen, known for her unconventional tactics during the asteroid belt conflicts, took command of the operation. She had studied every major military defeat in human history, learning from failure as much as victory. Her philosophy was simple. Wars were not won by superior firepower alone, but by understanding your enemy's weakness and exploiting it without mercy. The human fleet was a testament to their species' approach to warfare. Where other civilizations built massive dreadnoughts designed for long-range bombardment, humans built versatile craft capable of multiple roles. Their ships were smaller, faster, and equipped with technology that seemed primitive but was devastatingly effective. Nuclear weapons, considered barbaric by most spacefaring species, were standard armament. Kinetic kill vehicles, essentially massive tungsten rods accelerated to near light speed, could punch through any shield. But perhaps most terrifying were the boarding craft, filled with human marines trained in close-quarters combat. As the fleet prepared for departure, Admiral Chen addressed her crews. "The galaxy thinks humans are dangerous because we're violent. They're wrong. We're dangerous because we protect those who cannot protect themselves. We're dangerous because we never forget those who stand with us." The Zorani gave us translation technology that allowed us to speak with the stars. Now they're dying while the galaxy watches. Not on my watch. The fleet launched from Mars with unprecedented speed. 47 vessels carrying 30,000 personnel began their journey across the void. In the cargo holds, Marines checked their equipment. These were not ordinary soldiers, but members of the Orbital Drop Corps, trained to deploy from space directly into combat zones. Their armor was powered by miniature fusion reactors, their weapons designed to function in any environment from vacuum to methane atmospheres. Commander Sarah Mitchell led the 1st Battalion. She had grown up in the Australian outback, where survival meant respecting danger while never backing down from it. Her troops called her the Iron Widow, after she had continued fighting despite losing her entire squad in the Titan uprising. Now she studied the intelligence reports from Zorani Prime with cold precision. The Vorthak used energy weapons primarily, effective against shields but less so against physical armor. They relied on overwhelming firepower and fear tactics. They had never faced an enemy that thrived in chaos. The journey to Zorani Prime would take 72 hours using the new jump drives. During transit, the human fleet received updated intelligence from surviving Zorani satellites. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Half the planet's population had been killed or captured. The Vorthak had established processing centers where captured Zorani were being prepared for transport to slave markets. The images showed thousands of the peaceful beings packed into containment fields, their natural luminescence dimmed by despair. Admiral Chen studied the Vorthak fleet deployment with interest. They had arranged their ships in a standard imperial formation, designed to maximize overlapping fields of fire, while protecting their command vessel. It was textbook tactics for species that had only fought inferior opponents. They had made a critical error, assuming that humans would engage them in conventional fleet combat. Chen smiled grimly. Humans had learned long ago that there was no such thing as a fair fight in war. As the fleet approached the final jump point, Chen gathered her senior officers. The holographic display showed Zorani Prime surrounded by Vorthak vessels. "They expect us to announce our arrival, to demand their withdrawal, to negotiate," she said. "They expect us to follow the civilized rules of warfare that have governed galactic conflicts for millennia." She paused, looking at each officer in turn. "We're about to teach them that humans wrote their own rules. And rule number 1 is simple. Those who harm the innocent face total war." The human fleet made final preparations for combat. In the launch bays, fighter pilots ran through their checklists one last time. These were not the elegant craft used by other species, but brutal machines designed for one purpose: killing the enemy. They carried nuclear-tipped missiles, railguns, and electronic warfare packages that could overload enemy systems. The pilots themselves were selected from those who had survived Earth's most dangerous environments, from deep ocean explorers to asteroid miners. They understood that space was not a place for the timid. Wrath of the Deathworlders. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zorani system without warning. No announcement. No demands for surrender, no time for the Vorthak to prepare their defenses. Admiral Chen had positioned her forces using a technique learned from Earth's ancient naval battles. approaching from the system's star, to mask their heat signatures until the last possible moment. The Vorthak Empire had ruled through fear for centuries. They were about to learn what real fear meant. The first indication the Vorthak had of humanity's arrival was when their outer patrol vessels simply vanished. Stealth destroyers, equipped with experimental cloaking technology, had infiltrated the system hours earlier, using slower, undetectable approaches. They struck simultaneously, launching volleys of antimatter torpedoes at point-blank range. The patrol ship's shields, designed to handle energy weapons from distance, crumbled under the concentrated physical assault. Within minutes, 12 Vorthak vessels became expanding clouds of debris. Grand Admiral Vextor of the Vorthak fleet stood on his command bridge, watching the tactical display in disbelief. The humans had not followed any standard engagement protocol. There had been no formal challenge, no opportunity for negotiation, no respect for the conventions of civilized warfare. His subordinate commanders were requesting orders, their voices tinged with something the Vorthak rarely experienced: uncertainty. Chen's main fleet accelerated towards Zorani Prime at velocities that should have been impossible for ships of their size. Human engineers had made a breakthrough that other species considered insane. They had removed most safety limitations from their engines, accepting the risk of catastrophic failure in exchange for unprecedented speed and maneuverability. The Vorthak weapons officers struggled to achieve target locks on ships that moved like fighters, despite being the size of cruisers. The human attack came in waves, each more devastating than the last. First came the long-range kinetic strikes, massive tungsten rods, accelerated to 90% of light speed, slammed into Vorthak vessels with the force of atomic weapons. Shields designed to disperse energy found themselves useless against simple physics. The rods punched through hulls, causing explosive decompression and sending ships tumbling out of formation. Next came the fighters, hundreds of them swarming like angry hornets around the larger Vorthak vessels. They targeted weapons arrays, sensor clusters, and engine systems with surgical precision. When Vorthak point defense systems managed to destroy a human fighter, the pilot would often ram their damaged craft into enemy ships, turning their own death into a final weapon. This willingness to die for victory terrified the Vorthak more than any technology. Grand Admiral Vextor ordered his fleet to concentrate fire on the human flagship, identifying it as the largest vessel in their formation. It was another mistake. What appeared to be Admiral Chen's command ship was actually a modified cargo hauler, its hull filled with nuclear warheads. When the concentrated Vorthak fire finally breached its shields, the ship detonated with the force of a small star. The explosion temporarily blinded Vorthak sensors and communication systems, leaving them vulnerable and confused. In that moment of chaos, the real horror began. Boarding pods, launched from concealed positions throughout the human fleet, slammed into Vorthak vessels. Each pod carried a squad of human Marines, soldiers who had trained for this moment their entire lives. The Vorthak had superior technology, better armor, and home field advantage inside their own ships. None of it mattered. The Marines fought with a savagery that the Vorthak had never encountered. They used projectile weapons that could function in any environment, explosives that turned corridors into death traps, and close combat techniques evolved from millions of years of predatory evolution. When ammunition ran low, they fought with knives. When blades broke, they used their armored fists. When a Marine named Jackson lost both arms to a Vorthak energy blade, he headbutted his opponent to death before bleeding out, his final act to detonate a grenade that cleared the path for his squad. On the surface of Zorani Prime, the Vorthak ground forces received reports of the space battle with growing alarm. They had never considered the possibility of defeat. Their species had conquered through superior firepower and intimidation for generations. Now they faced an enemy that seemed to grow stronger the more desperate the situation became. The processing centers where Zorani prisoners were held became the next target of human fury. Drop pods fell from the sky like meteors, each one containing a fire team of orbital Marines. They landed directly in the middle of Vorthak positions, using the kinetic energy of their descent as a weapon. The pods hit with enough force to create craters, their armor plates exploding outward to clear landing zones. The Marines emerged already firing, their suits' AI systems identifying and prioritizing targets faster than organic thought. Commander Mitchell led the assault on the largest processing center, where 10,000 Zorani were being held. The Vorthak had positioned the facility in a mountainous region, believing the terrain would provide natural defense. They had not considered that humans had evolved as persistence hunters, capable of crossing any terrain in pursuit of prey. Mitchell's forces scaled cliffs that the Vorthak considered impassable, attacked from directions that defied conventional tactical logic. The battle for the processing center lasted 6 hours. The Vorthak defenders outnumbered the human forces 3-1 and had superior defensive positions. But humans had not become the dominant species on a death world by fighting fair. They used the Vorthak's own weapons against them, turning captured energy cannons on their former owners. They released toxic gases that their sealed suits protected them from but left Vorthak soldiers choking. They broadcast recordings of Vorthak death screams on their communication frequencies, psychological warfare that shattered enemy morale. When Mitchell finally breached the containment area where the Zorani were held, she found thousands of the peaceful beings near death. The Vorthak had been draining their life energy, using it to power their weapons. The rage that filled her was cold and precise. She opened a channel to all human forces. No quarter, no prisoners. They want to act like monsters. We show them what real monsters look like. In space, Admiral Chen received reports of the successful ground operations while continuing to demolish the Vorthak fleet. Her tactics had completely disrupted their command structure. Without clear leadership, individual Vorthak captains began to flee, abandoning their mission in favor of survival. Chen let some escape. They would carry the message to the rest of the Vorthak Empire. Humanity was coming. The final blow came when Chen deployed humanity's most controversial weapon. The quantum virus was not a biological weapon, but a computer program designed to infiltrate and corrupt artificial intelligence systems. The Vorthak, like most advanced civilizations, relied heavily on AI for ship operations, navigation, and weapons control. The virus spread through their fleet like wildfire, turning their own systems against them. Ships fired on their allies. Navigation systems flew vessels into planets, and life support systems simply shut down. Grand Admiral Vextor's command ship was the last to fall. As human marines breached his bridge, he stood tall, expecting the honor of a warrior's death. Instead, Commander Mitchell removed her helmet, revealing a face marked by battle but unmistakably human. "You attacked those who couldn't defend themselves," she said quietly. "You enslaved peaceful beings who had shown nothing but kindness to the galaxy. You thought fear made you powerful." She raised her weapon. "We're going to make your entire empire an example of what happens when you mistake human kindness for weakness." The battle for Zorani Prime lasted less than 20 hours. The Vorthak fleet was completely destroyed, their ground forces eliminated to the last soldier. The human fleet had lost 30% of their ships and over 5,000 personnel. By conventional military standards, it was a Pyrrhic victory. But humans had not come for victory. They had come for vengeance. In the aftermath, as medical teams worked to save surviving Zorani, Ambassador Keelan approached Admiral Chen. The Zorani's body flickered with weak patterns of gratitude and sorrow. "You came," she whispered, her translator struggling with the emotion in her voice. "We sent our plea into the darkness, and you answered. But the cost? So many of your people died for us." Chen looked out at the burning wreckage of the Vorthak fleet, debris that would orbit Zorani Prime for generations as a warning to others. "That's what humans do," she said simply. "We protect our friends. We stand for those who cannot stand, and we make sure that anyone who thinks about harming the innocent remembers that somewhere in the darkness humanity is watching." The news of the battle spread across the galaxy within days. The Vorthak Empire, which had seemed unstoppable, began to fragment as slave populations rose up, inspired by humanity's example. Other aggressive species quietly withdrew their expansion plans, suddenly concerned about provoking the Deathworlders from Sol system. The Zorani became humanity's strongest allies, their recovered technology helping to establish a new galactic order based on mutual defense rather than conquest. Years later, when historians tried to understand how a single battle had changed the balance of power in the galaxy, they focused on the wrong elements. It was not humanity's weapons or tactics that made them dangerous. It was their psychology, evolved on a world where everything tried to kill them, where cooperation meant survival, where protecting the pack was more important than individual life. The Vorthak had made the fatal error of attacking those whom humans had claimed as pack. They had awakened not just a military force but an entire species that had survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans could be the greatest friends, sharing technology, culture, and protection freely, but threaten those they protected, harm those they called friend, and they would show why their world was classified as a death world, not because Earth was trying to kill them, but because it had failed, creating instead the galaxy's most effective killers who chose to be protectors. The monument erected on Zorani Prime bore a simple inscription in both human and Zorani languages. Here humanity answered the call. Here friendship was paid in blood. Here the galaxy learned that some species choose not to be monsters but never forget how.